Good day, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Living on Purpose, the show about intentionally creating the happy, successful life you deserve. We are on location again this week as my travels to get my kids settled at college continues. Huge shout out to the Delta Sky Club Lounge at Boston Logan International Airport for these sweet soundproof booths so I didn't have to record over airport announcements. I'm your host, Mark Barton, author of the Living on Purpose course and owner of Bought In for the Win LLC. If you find something of value in this show, please use the contact information at the end to connect with me, and we'll discuss how the happiness success cycle based coaching or training can benefit you or your organization. And now, on with the show. Last week we talked about defining your success. I explained how the definition of success has to shift with the environment so we don't set ourselves up for failure. This week we're going to talk about believing that better is an option and how we can put mental conditioning to work for us. I have a good personal example from my experience of moving my son into his dorm this week and some kudos to throw out on the organizational and leadership examples. But first, let me clarify a little bit about what better is an option really means. The reason that better is an option comes immediately after mental conditioning is because it's simply following up on the areas where we saw ourselves flourishing. Essentially, we're taking small, deliberate actions to move us towards the thriving version of ourselves we envisioned. Particularly, it's about making sure those actions are consistent with our purpose and values. It should be a very reinforcing process. As we begin to do this incremental growth, it also allows us to intentionally focus on any areas of weakness that we may have brought with us from our mental conditioning. The idea is that we grow the good while we work on the weaknesses. As we do this, we begin to increase our value, or as I refer to it in the course, the stock price at U Inc. These small victories turn into large gains in moving towards empowerment and confidence in generating the positive outcomes that we want for ourselves. That explanation sounds very theoretical, so let me give you three real-world examples of very simple yet meaningful applications. First, I'll share my own personal experience from this past week. My personal example of better as an option comes from a little story I like to refer to as Mark versus the dorm room furniture. I'm usually exceptionally gifted at problem solving, particularly spatial reasoning types such as moving furniture around the dorm room. However, as we were moving my son in, I just couldn't quite get my mind around what exactly the most efficient and effective layout for the room was. We tried a few different combinations, but none of them really seemed to give the yep, this is it vibe. Mitchell and I share the same idea about this concept and that there is a best possible configuration and we have to figure it out. But for whatever reason, we just couldn't land on it. After a while, he decided good was good enough because he knew he was going to rearrange things several times over the next few weeks anyways. I, on the other hand, couldn't let this go. Part of my mental conditioning for going into this experience in the first place was finding a functional long-term setup for the dorm room. Kind of a point of pride for me. So once all the heavy lifting was done and the things were moved into his room or the adjacent hallway, I decided to go roam the hallways and look at other rooms and move some furniture around in some of the empty rooms to take another crack at this puzzle. I was operating on the theory that if better is an option, then good is not enough. After a few minutes of sliding furniture around, I found what I felt was the best combination, but I also knew I couldn't just go back into Mitchell's room and start moving things around. He and my wife were far too deep in the unpacking process for me to engage in that. So to really make this be a better is an option situation, I had to keep my peace in the moment and simply share the idea that I had come up with. Sometimes better is an option isn't just about an action or accomplishing the success picture in that very moment, but it might be something as simple as laying the groundwork for continued future successes. In this case, my future success is the peace of mind of knowing that my child is happy, or at least at peace, in his new living environment. To echo this sentiment, let me share with you a great example of an organization applying a similar version of better as an option. During the first leg of this journey, we took the Amtrak auto train from Florida to Virginia. The 2 days prior to our departure had been canceled due to Hurricane Debby, and there were still some areas along the route that had debris and flooding. Having multiple days of cancellations and rescheduling could have easily thrown the Amtrak crew into mass chaos, or at a minimum, a reduced level of service. However, I felt not only the individual service, but also the overall crew attitude and atmosphere was extremely positive and replicated its way throughout the passengers. Despite all of the obstacles that presented potential operational weaknesses, the Amtrak crew lived up to not only their company values, but just general hospitality industry values. The train was completely full, but yet they remained attentive and upbeat. It was almost as if they had a meeting and said, well, this could really suck, but let's don't let it. As an organization, the collective crew did all the little things to keep the train on the track, and literally and figuratively moving in a positive direction. Better as an option, or positive growth, within an organization can be very dependent upon the small successes of the individual members towards the collective effort. On this particular train route, the crew did exactly that, and we had a very positive experience. In keeping with the positive experiences, I want to share one more story from our trip this past week that was an unexpected but grateful encounter with leadership moving towards better as an option. Anytime we're in New York City, it is an absolute must that I take my wife to the gluten-free bakery Posh Pop Bake Shop. Quick free advertisement for Posh Pop. They deliver nationwide, and I promise you it's worth it if you have gluten sensitivities or allergies. Check them out at poshpopbakeshop.com. So anyways, I never remember exactly how to get anywhere in New York City, and we didn't have time for a wild goose chase adventure, so I did a quick Google search. But Google said that there was actually a location on the next street over at the backside of the very hotel we were staying in. I couldn't believe it. Unfortunately, when we walked there, it wasn't quite open yet. However, we're still overjoyed to find out they were opening a second location and proceeded to make our way down to the original. After indulging ourselves with our to-go order for our road trip, my wife recognized the co-owner and talked to her briefly about the new location and how excited she was. You could hear the passion in the owner's voice about how big of a step this was for their small bakery to now be expanding into Times Square. So what does this have to do with better as an option? Well, as leaders, particularly as a business leader, choosing to do better is not always easy and quite often can be fiscally risky. But at the end of the day, that's what makes you a leader. Being able to do the mental conditioning and see the people, the organization, and yourself flourishing and have the courage to move forward towards better. Now, I have absolutely no doubt that the owners of Posh Pop went through quite a few cycles of decision making, accountability, and mental conditioning before taking the initiative to open this new location at one of the most visited but also expensive locations in the world. I want to congratulate the owners of Posh Pop for not only opening their new location, but also understanding that as awesome as their current location is, a lot of people who visit New York City wouldn't make the trek down to Greenwich Village to their Greenwich Village location. By opening this new location, they're making their company better, not just because they're expanding, but because they're able to stand on their company values of bringing the world's best gluten-free baked goods to as many people as possible. I can only hope to take my wife's comment seriously when she said, if you ever want to move to Florida, because I would love to see a location at, let's say Disney Springs. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Regardless, thanks for believing in your company and bringing us your better. Thanks for checking in with me this week and learning a little bit about how you can craft your own better reality. Regardless of whether you're trying to move a kid into a dorm room and give him the best furniture setup possible, keep a train full of people that have been delayed for 2 days happily moving down the track so they have a great experience, or expanding your amazing small business to bring your greatness to even more people. The idea that we have to put ourselves out there a little bit in order to find better and do better and make better, it doesn't just happen. Creating a better life, a better organization, and being a better leader all require hard work. Very hard work. But if you do it in small, manageable chunks, focusing on growing the strengths while you work on the weaknesses, you'll very quickly become empowered and most definitely increasing your value that you bring to the world. Take some time this week to examine some of the small areas in your own life or your own organization where you can make a few changes for the better, and don't be afraid to work hard at them, because if you aren't bought in, you sold out.